Hello friends, welcome to the Jazz Ranch and happy summer. It's summertime, the horses are out on the range, the altar dominant ego man is out there attending to them, and everything is very peaceful here. I'm glad you joined me. You know, some of my subscribers and people who bought my book, they want me to describe lessons in my book. In other words, play for them lessons in my book and describe them so they can understand it better. So I'm going to do that this evening on Basic Jazz Improvisations, my chapter 21 in book 2. And I'm going to be talking about how to approach improvisation from a technical side of it. In other words, just the academic or intellectual side of it with 4 steps. Now, improvisation, you can't learn it from a book. You have to go out there into the world. You have to go to jazz clubs. You have to listen to recordings. You have to listen to the greats. You have to try to imitate them. You have to learn their lines, and so on and so on. It's a big study. You have to play with other musicians and learn as you go. You can't learn it from a book. But I'm going to give you 4 rules, 4 steps now that are technical and sort of intellectual steps, but they will work for you. So try these steps, let me know how you feel about it. And here we go with jazz improvisation. This is volume 2 of my book, and it's chapter 21 called Improvisation for Jazz. Now, this is an exercise in improvisation. It's a very simple exercise. It's the way I figured out how to improvise, starting out in a very basic way. And the first thing is to just play the C scale starting on different notes. Now those are modes. So we're going to be playing a progression that is a 2-5-1 in C. Now that means it's D minor 7, G7, C major 7. So you see that laid out here for you now. The first scale is Dorian, the second is Mixolydian, and then the third scale is Ionian. You don't need to learn those names particularly unless you want to, but they sound like this. The Dorian is just a C scale starting on D, and it's played with a D minor 7 chord in the left hand. Here's the scale. Here's what it sounds like. And now the G Mixolydian, and then the C Ionian. Ascending, descending. It's a good idea to learn these scales ascending and descending. Now let's look at those scales on the keyboard. Okay, I hope you can see the keyboard because the sun is here and I have to deal with that. But anyway, the first step is to play the 2-5-1 in C. 1 measure each for each chord. So it's D minor 7 to G7. That's inverted G7. This would be root position. So I'm taking it down to that inversion. It's a second inversion. And then C major 7 to C6. Now they get 4 beats each, so you have a 4-bar passage. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4. Now it's all 8th notes in the right hand playing the scale C, starting on the root of each chord. So D minor, that scale there, and then the G7 is, that's a Mixolydian scale. Now the Ionian scale is just a C scale starting on C. And then you can descend. So you can ascend and descend on each of these scales, but it's important to know what the scales are. This is as simple as it gets, but you want to start with that and then begin to learn scales in other keys as well as scales that relate to whatever the chord progression is. But we're just going to be doing the key of C, 2-5-1 progression. Now step 2 is really important because we're going to have ascending motion and descending motion, and that balances it out. So, and we're also going to have skips. Now skips would create vertical movement. Stepwise or scale-wise would involve horizontal movement. So on the first chord, the D minor 7, now we're going to skip notes. Instead of playing just the scale, we're going to now alternate between notes and create an arpeggio or skips, like from D to F to A to C, and then ascending, and then we're going to descend in a scale, and then connecting that to the G7, the same idea. Then descending in a scale, and then an arpeggio. You see, so now you're combining 4 elements: ascending, descending, skips, and steps. Now this step is very important because what we're doing is we are now taking that scale and we're skipping notes. So we're going, instead of, we're skipping the second note, we're going up to there, we're skipping a note going up there. So we're playing actually vertical movement. You know, this is horizontal, stepwise like that, and the scale is horizontal. Vertical is skipping. So it's like an arpeggio. We call that an arpeggio. So now we're just playing chord tones, ascending, then we descend in a scale. So it's ascending, vertical, descending, horizontal. To the next chord, same thing. Ascending, vertical, descending, horizontal. And then descending, horizontal. Then skipping up there, and then another vertical movement there, descending. So combining the horizontal vertical movement in scales and in skips, that's what you're striving for in step 2. Step 3 is very important as well, because now we're going to be removing some notes. We're going to be simplifying the rhythmic values. Now we're not just going to be playing a series of eighth notes, because that's going to sound like an exercise. We want to create shapes, rhythmic and melodic shapes. So now I'm going to vary the rhythm. You see, I'm going to, instead of, now I'm going to go like that, ascending and then descending stepwise, and then descending. Now it's beginning to take shape as a melody. Now that's the same thing as step 2, but all I've done is simplify the rhythm and taken some notes out and make sure that I have important target tones and approach tones. Now I'm going to talk about those on the keyboard. Now you could practice step 2 for a long time with a variety of different ways of doing it. You don't have to start on the one. You could, you know. But I'm going to go to step 3 now, because I want to show you the very important step 3, which is to simplify the rhythmic values using the same scale, but now you're going to really create a melodic shape. Now, that's very important, because step 1 and step 2 are really exercises. This one actually begins to have a rhythmic shape and a melodic shape. So the rhythmic values are different. Like instead of just being 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and now we have 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and a 1 and 2. Now it's very important that you count. You have to be able to count these phrases to understand them. But this is written out for you. But like 1, 2. Now skipping up to there. But now rhythmically it's this 1, 2 and 3 and 4. And so I had to take some notes out, because the first phrase, or part 2, was this. So I'm taking out the G there. Now I'm landing on the G now. So I didn't have to go. Now I go. See, because I changed the rhythmic value. So this is really important. Then like this. So now I talked about the importance of the target tone and approach tone. So what you have here is target tone, chord tones, approach tones, target tone, chord tones, approach tones, target tone, chord tones, approach tone, target tone. Now, that's maybe the most important thing. Now, this is for composers or for improvisers. You need to know how to use those techniques to come to a target tone and use approach tones. whether it be, this is just using the C scale. We're going to go into chromatics, and it's going to give you a lot more possibilities in the next step. But the importance of the target tone and the approach tone is paramount, along with the idea that you balance the phrase between ascending motion and descending motion and skips and scales. So I've really broken it down for you into those ingredients. Let's go to step 4. Step 4, which is the last step I'm going to talk about in part 1, is to add some chromatic approach tones. So I'm going to create some chromatic notes that are outside of the C scale now. So the first one, I'm going to take the same melody that I had in the previous section. I went like this. Now I'm going to go. So I'm putting that B flat note in there to approach the B on the G7 chromatically. Simplified the rhythm there. And then another chromatic note here, an E flat connecting to the E on the C major. Now continuing that phrase, I put an F sharp here to approach the E now on the C6. The last step in this basic improvisation exercise is to create chromatic approach tones. So we had this melody. So now I'm just going to change it to this. So I'm taking a different target tone there now because I want that chromatic note. I could have gone, but that doesn't sound as good. I like this. So that's really one of the most important things you can learn, is just that idea of the chord tones and then using this chromatic approach tone to get to a target tone on the next chord. So again, continuing that approach tone to that target tone. And that's really improvisation in its simplest form and in a nutshell. Now, this is just technical. It doesn't have anything to do with your imagination or your passion or anything that is really important in improvisation. It's just a technical exercise that gets you using these important concepts. Now you may be saying, well, this doesn't sound like jazz. Well, it doesn't, because it's just an exercise. But through those 4 steps, knowing the scale, starting on the chord tone, playing it in horizontal vertical movement, simplifying the rhythmic values, and adding chromatic notes. Those 4 steps are going to give you a lot to work with, because you can, change keys. You can try this in the key of F. You can try it in the key of B flat or the key of G, So how do you make it sound like jazz? By using swing eighths and creating a jazz feeling. So like just for the right hand, maybe instead of it being, I'm going to do like swing eighths, like, I might comp in the left hand, but just to start, just put the chord in there. Like that, on beat 1, then maybe syncopate it later. Now it's important to repeat the pattern, so that you practice it, you begin to really get it intuitively, to begin to hear it, and not only feel it in. The advantage as a pianist is you can actually see the shape of it there on the keyboard. We have a special advantage as pianists. We can see the pattern of it there. We see that outlines the D minor, and this outlines a G7, and then we see this approach to the 3rd there of the C chord. Back there again. Now you want to try it in a different key, and you want to just create your own ideas, but using these simple rules. Now, once you've sort of mastered that phrase, you might want to try it in to see if you can transpose it. That's a good test on your ears. Like, can you hear that as being the same but in a different pitch? Can you hear this? So you can intellectualize it by figuring out the steps of the scale relating to the chord, or you can use your ears to find it. You know, either way, and both ways, using both ways, a combination of your ears, your hearing, and the steps of the scale, I think are the best. But some people are stronger with their ears, some people are stronger with their intellect. So, like, this is a good test to see where you're at. But you want to combine both of those and understand what you're doing, you know, in terms of these particular steps that I've talked about. And that's just the beginning of improvisation. You know, if you have a sense of melody, or you can think of melody, you know that this is really what creates good melody, is these shapes, these horizontal, vertical shapes that have passing tones and target tones and chromatic tones. That's really what makes up melody, and most songs are written that way. So look at songs, look at the melody of songs, and try to learn something about improvisation from the melodies, you know. Often the melodies are much simpler. They don't involve eighth notes, but they have good target tones and good approach tones, and good balance of ascending, descending, skips, and steps. That's pretty much what it's all about. Thanks for joining me. I hope you learned something from this exercise in jazz improvisation. You know, as I said earlier, you have to learn to improvise from recordings, from live performances, from the real deal. This is just an exercise. I tried to analyze what makes a good melody, and what makes a good melody is also what makes good improvisation. So let me know how you feel about this, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the next time around. Until then, I will say, in the words of my great friend Hermie Dressel, God rest his merry soul, swing loose, and we'll see you next time around. Bye-bye.